This is a shir in Sefer Tanya, and we are holding at the moment in Perek Gimel, right near the end of the Perek, right in the last few lines of the Perek, on page 14 of the printed Sefer, and today is Tuesday, late Tuesday afternoon, or what's the date today? I've forgotten. Chof Ches, right? Yeah. Today is Chof Ches, right? So it's Earl Chof Tes. Earl Chof Tes, Shvat, Toshin, Iron Base. So we saw at some length the three main aspects of the moichin, of the koyach HaMoich, the koyachas of the moich to Chochmah, Bina, V'das, and we saw that they give rise to the Sheva Midas, to the Inan Midas, which were Ikar, Chesed, Ugvura, and the other Midas, which are Tiferes and Netzach V'Hod and Yesod and Malchus, they derive, even of Teildus, V'Anofim, and branches or born out entities from the two main midas of Chesed and Gvura. And we saw that the powers of the Moach divided themselves, first of all, into Chochmah, which was the appearance from the mind in general, the Koyach HaMaskil, the appearance of the first intense knowledge of when I say knowledge, appreciation of the Inyan in an intense light of the Etzem, the very essence of the Asoga. Then there was the ability to develop that point, that essential light of the essence of the understanding, to develop it and bring it into understanding at length and breadth and depth. Well, that was the Koyach HaBina. And from the Koyach HaBina developed and came out and were born the Inyan of the Midas Chesed Gvura. And we saw in some detail about the actual birth of the Midas Derech Yirei Eloah, and then the Ahava Azor that arises in the Nefesh through a profound use of Chochmah and Bina, particularly the power of Bina, and that gives rise to Midas. First of all, Yira and Pachad, and then we saw Ahava Azor in the Nefesh. And we saw that Ahava was based on Yesod HaEish, the element of fire in the Nefesh Elokis. Mashenkin, the Moichin, particularly Chochmah, the Evodin of Mayim, and the Inyan of Krilus, and what we might call settlement of the understanding in a way not of burning fire but of calmness, but nonetheless also giving rise to a certain type of Ahava. Now we come to the concept of Das. Is there some problem with that? Now we've come to the concept of Das, and we began briefly by saying that the Inyan of Das was based on an expression in the Torah for describing the marital union between male and female, was called also the Inyan of Yedio, Adam Yodo, as Chavo, prior to the giving birth of Cain. In the Torah, it's written that expression, and we saw that was a lashon implying the concept of intertwovenness, of interboundness, being bound up together, two entities being bound together in a very profound and unyielding way. The Ishchabris, also the concept of joining together and almost the idea of like a union of friendship. Shemakasher, Daitoi, that the Adam, through having come in understanding to all the details of the matter, He's then Makasha Daite, he binds his mind and his das, literally his mind over Bekesher Amitz Chozok Ma'id, with a very, very powerful knot, and that knot is also strong and unyielding, Chozok Ma'id, very much so. Now that's the power of the Moyach itself. And then we're going to learn in the next chapter about the Koach HaMachshava, what Machshava means thought, and from understanding in the power of Bina, then and Das also, it comes into what we call the power of thought. The Yitka Machshavta will take the power of thought, and he literally jams it with all of like we hammer in a peg or something in a tent. It's called Vayitka, that we jam it in, hammer it in very powerfully, b'choizek, powerfully, begadlus ein sof baruch hu, in the greatness of the Eibishter, how he's ain't safe, utterly unlimited, blessed be he. Ve'eno mosiach daite, and the mensch never takes his mind off the idea and the concept to which he's bound himself over and tied himself up with such a tremendous knot. He remains in that continuously, and it lives in his mind in a way that he never takes his mind off it. Eino Masiach Daita. So we see then that there's a power, as we explained in the last class, I think briefly, there's a power in the brain called Das, and Das doesn't add anything into the actual Hasoga and the actual knowledge that you've already gained through Chokhmah Bina. The details and all of the concept is about, all the implications of that concept, and all that it has to say as a concept in brain power, that's been established in Bina. And if you didn't do the work in Bina, then you haven't really got what to bring to Das. And if you just, skip around but don't really understand the implications and the makeup of the idea in detail, then you haven't really got what to bind just yourself over to, because it's not really anything meaningful or well defined in your mind. Well, once it's become meaningful and well defined in your mind, what's the power of Bina? Then there's a power in the brain, still within the brain, to commit oneself. And like we discussed at some length, the concept of commitment. And not just commitment, but of feeling and being aware in a form of emotional binding and emotional attachment to the thing which you understood while it's still in the brain. And that power of emotional attachment in the brain, well, that leads down and makes a direct connection with the heart. In other words, the Indian of Das. So now this is not to be confused with what we had in the moment of the night, that there's a certain reaction of the mind in Bina, also in a certain emotional way. But there, it's a sensitivity, what the seichel might imply by way of feeling. Das is a feeling, I would define that Das is a holy feeling of the self. Now normally by Siddim, to feel yourself is not a highly trusted concept. To feel yourself is connected with the idea of yeshes and a conceit and things of that nature. However, there's a feeling of the self and an awareness of the self-commitment whereby deep in yourself you live over and you're committed to what you represent in life, what you would like to represent and like to understand, and how you would like to build and shape and experience your life. The commitment to how that's going to be done, that's called filling of the self. Now that's not necessarily an unpleasant filling of the self. If that's turned in the wrong directions, then it can lead to deceit, plus a lot of other tivas as well. Once you get conceit, then you think everything is due to you. You know, think if the other guy's got cup, why should I not have it? And then you fall into all the lusts and all the desires of this world. That's the feeling of the self in a not good direction. But there's a feeling of the self and of being aware of your own self and therefore experiencing what your mind has told you and living it over and feeling it and becoming, as it were, in the mind, committed very deeply and shaping out how you're going to live that in an emotional picture in your life. Well, that's how I would define in a vernacular way the koyach of das. And therefore it's not the moichin midah sheba moichin that we learned about the other night, nor the very essence of the moyach's ability to experience and feel in such a way that it'll get to the midas for sure, and it'll bring emotional reaction in your heart as well. That what we had the other night can be very abstract. The midas sheba moichin, they don't necessarily, and they need das to bring them down. In other words, there's no real change or no real development of you in yourself as a person on the basis of what you understood unless you're going to have das. And so everybody has a das. The question is, are you really interested where your das is going? And are you really committed, mitzad your das, in the right direction? So where there's a feeling of the self, and like I said, a holy feeling of the self, and a feeling, an awareness of the self in Kedusha, then that's an ability to bring the moyach into the heart and connect the mensch up and make him a living unity the way Torah wants it. And there's one on that it's brought down the story in Likutei Deburim that in the year Tov Reish Samach Gimel, and the year Tov Reish Samach Gimel, the Rebbe Rashab visited Berlin, and he spoke with a professor, a leading professor. Some actually say it was, some people claim it was Freud. But I don't want to go into that, but anyway, he spoke to a leading professor about his health, and they couldn't figure what was really wrong with the Rebbe Rashab. He was continuously suffering from weakness and inability to go ahead at that time. So after having had a meaningful conversation with the Rebbe, this professor said that the Rebbe Rashab's main problem is that he keeps being committed to everything he's learned and everything he knows so tremendously that he must continuously improve, that he can't stand being the next minute the way he was the minute before. He wants continually to be better and to be higher and to go closer to Elikus. And so he said a person who's like that can't really be restfully healthy because he's all the time fighting what seems to be an impossible goal, and that takes tremendous toll of the normal nervous powers of a person. I said that's how he, very interestingly enough, he diagnosed the Rebbe Rashab's problem. Yeah, and then he spoke to the Rebbe Rashab more in detail about what was the whole inyan of Chassidus, well, the whole inyan of Chassidic teaching and so on. And so the Rebbe Rashab said to him that the whole main central secret of Chassidic teaching is you have to unite the mind with the heart. And they're two very, very different worlds, very, very separate worlds, and to bring them together and make what you had here, down here, and that you believe a living entity of down here, what you understood up here, well, that's a very profound task. And so the Rebbe hinted that there's a power in the brain which actually will do that for you, and that's the koyach hadas. And that's the koyach hadas, the ability to join you up and make you a living unity and a living entity of what you understand. It should be down here. So when the professor heard that, he said that's an almost impossible task. He said he doesn't believe that that's a feasible teaching. That there are few other people who are going to make this. That's what he said. But the Rebbe Rashab said that he can't retract and go back because that's in effect that is what Chassidus and the Chassidic teaching are all about. Up to here, the story. So we see it as a power, as the Rebbe given into our brain to blind this and to, how do you call it, bridge this tremendous gap between, when I say gap, this tremendous difference. I'll call it a gap. A gap is a very heavy word. But this tremendous almost antithesis between the world of the moyach and the world of the emotions and the heart, planted deep in the, even deep in the sense that the koach hadas is in the brain, according to the whole analogy of Chassidic teaching, that it's at the bottom of the brain, sort of towards the back. In other words, ready to sort of go down through the necessary channels to get into the heart. Well, I won't go into them now. What are all the risks that it faces on the way to get it down into the heart? But there's a power given into us, and that's in our brain. It's not in our heart; it's in the brain, which will bring down the brain into the heart. That's the koach hadas, and it's a very very difficult to define power, because it's not brain in the usual sense. It's not bina. It's not understanding. You finish the understanding by the time you begin using das. It's not understanding. It doesn't necessarily add anything new into the whole understanding. It's a power of self-involvement, of becoming committed to what you understood, and to bring the emotions. And why the emotions? Because the emotions are what make us do things. They're what make us live in an expressive and meaningful and active way. If you don't get emotionally stirred, you remain detached. And that's what the brain is. The brain is, by definition, it's detached. And so in order to get into the heart and to bring that detachment into the heart, we have koach hadas. That's this whole concept that we're talking here about koach hadas. And so, just like all the natural things that are put into us by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as a matana, they're a gift which is given to us. Chokhmah is a gift, Bina is a gift, so is das. Das is in you. All you've got to do is, and here it would seem that this is something common to all three of them and to all the other koachas of the nefesh. You've got to have a certain basic commitment, and that commitment is called in Chassidus rotzen. You've got to have a certain will. There's got to be a certain desire and a general will on the part of the Adam to go in a certain direction and to be committed to certain inyanim, and to make them the goal and the gain of his life. And if you have that rotzen, panimi va'atzmi, which commits you to the Eibush and to the way of Yiddishkeit, and then your das will come into action. And that also leads us to another slight difficulty in the meaning of das. Sometimes it's implied in different passages about das that once you have das, then you have this iskashrus and this ischabrus, then you become bound over. And other passages tend to imply that if you are attached and bound over, then you'll get to das. Then you'll get it. So it's kilo. You can't have a cake and eat it too. A kilo, either the attachment brings to das, or here it's mashma that das is called the attachment, which would intend to imply that once you've already got das, then you get into the attachment and the iskashrus into the muskal, and then you get eventually done. So what I would suggest is that it's a inyam and hashgacha pratis, and it's different by different people. Some people have a natural gift. For example, it's brought mafurish in Chassidus. They have a natural gift of the power of bina. That once they get an idea from maybe even from somebody else or from some sefer, then they can develop on the idea, and they're what's called bali havona. The people, the koach habina is very good by them. Some people are bali hamtzoa, it's called in Chassidus, that they can produce you a new idea, from the koach hachokhmah. But when it comes to developing it, they're not very gifted. They will just give somebody the idea and they'll say, you work at it, that's not for me. They will produce an intensely brilliant new idea. In other words, that different hashgacha prati is different divine, what you might call intentions almost, that some of us are gifted one way, some of us are emphasized in a different way. So the same with das. Sometimes you call people, in Yiddish you say a person a dayton. A dayton means that he's got a lot of das. He seems to be very much involved in what he's doing. He's tremendously committed, and therefore he's very strong about his opinion in that matter. And you can usually say about a Dayton that you won't shift him. You know, once he's got an idea, he's got it, because he's a Datan. In other words, he's got das very richly given to him as a matana. So a person who has das very much so, he will come to these kashas after he's already got das. He will feel the commitment, and that will lead him to be miskasha, be mischaber, and all these inyanim. Lo maseh das, it won't take his mind off it. Some people are going to have to go through that in order to really feel the das, because they don't really. Some people tend to be detached. You know, you don't find on them, or you don't feel on them a tremendous enthusiasm about what they learn. So they need to. Maybe I'm suggesting that maybe they need, first of all, to go through the binding themselves over and being obstinate with a tremendous power of will, of rotzen they really want. Then they will have this emotional commitment deep inside, very much deep inside, which is the whole self. That we said was the feeling of the self. That's they come to us through these kashras, chabras, we call it. Oh, but whichever way you go at it, whichever way you use it, it's all under the general umbrella of das. It's all in and around das. It's just that sometimes it works that way from somebody who's better of das. He has a lot of commitment in himself to things that he does, or it works sometimes, possibly the other way. But once you get to it, then you become mischaber. You join up with the matter, and it becomes you and it become one entity. What you understood and what you live, that's all one. That's all one entity, and therefore, says the Alter Rebbe, it's yitka machshavtei b'choizek. Then you put your mind into it, and you're like, there's an expression in Yiddish, you're farhakt. You are hammered in and jammed in, and you can't move. You're sort of like a peg that's been hammered into a tent pole. You know, it's very, very strong and it holds it to the ground very tightly. Well, that's the way you're hammered up. And you're hammered in, and you don't let go, and you keep. That's somebody who's already either come this way or come that way, but he's come to the final produce of das, which is that you're there the whole time, and you never let it go. And in Igeres HaKodesh, the Alter Rebbe talks about this right near the end of chapter 15. Right near the end, he talks about das, and over there he says that if you let go, even a person who's got a lot of das, but if you let go and you just sort of let it ride for a day or two, says the Alter Rebbe, you can lose it. The whole midah, whole feeling can be withdrawn back into the helema, the hidingness of the soul. In other words, you've got to keep working the whole time. And das is not a lasting thing. It's something that you've got to hold at, and it's got to be precious to you. But if you let loose and you let it go, then to a certain extent it will let you go. It will retire for the time being. In other words, that you've got to be continuously involved, and it's got to be a strong thing. And that's why we find that somebody who's a Dayton usually tends to be a strong, opinionated person. And once he holds something, he's got it, and it's brought down in the Hemshech of Eto from the Rebbe Rashab, where he talks a lot about das. Talks of the whole big series of my mom, all about the Koyach HaDas. And he brings down over there that somebody who has the Koyach HaDas is usually an unmovable person. He's very strong, and he knows what he wants, and he says it clearly, and there's no doubt about it, and you can rely on him that he will see the matter through to its finality. So, therefore, maybe we could suggest that that's why there's an interesting passage in the Zohar Kodesh. I saw it, matter of fact, I saw it the other day. I was looking up some material. It was the moment that we're learning. And over there, the Zohar Kodesh says that the Koyach HaDas is called the Ben HaBechoya of Chochmah Bina. How do you call it? the firstborn son of Chochmah Bina, Bukhra. But in Aramic expression in the Zohar, in the language used in the Zohar Kodesh, it's called Bar Bukhra, the firstborn son. And so it's brought down in the Meforshim over there that the firstborn son, he gets two portions. Yeah? And those two portions are Ava V'yira. That inside Das, hidden inside it, are Ava V'yira. Or Derech Agav, that's one of the reasons why on the tefillin, on the tefillin you have a shin, and then with three heads, and then a shin with four heads on the other side. The shin with three heads, that's Koach HaDas, how it is Be'etzim, how it's still Shaykh to Bina. And the four heads is Koach HaDas Be'etzim, it's got another head because it's got in itself, as it were, two aspects. Ava V'yira, that it's got two heads which imply the Moichin as such, and two other heads which imply Ava V'yira. In other words, it's like the Das going down into the middle. It's the whole into the tefillin that should be, you should use your moyach, but you should use your moyach to go, that's the Ratzuas. The Ratzuas bind your head also to, and therefore the Ratzuas have to come down at least as far as the heart. And if they go just underneath the heart, then they're kosher. I hope he did. Remember, it's a whole inyan. This inyan of Das. I remember the firstborn son, and the firstborn son is usually he's about a mensch with a takeoff, he has a certain ability in him, and he's like the leader of the family. He's got a certain leading position compared to the other children, and so on and so forth. I don't see him in Das. The Das is the first born off child of the Chochmah Bina. Ultimately, there's going to be other children, or that's the Midas, as it were. But if you don't have first of all the Bina B'choil, you're not going to get to the Midas. And so that's basically the picture. Yeah, you become, either you're naturally given a certain power of commitment and then you develop on it, or you came to it through your will and through being committed. Whichever way, you get this deep commitment and this feeling that what you understood is going down, and it's going to become a living example, an entity in your feeling and in your heart. And it's going to be divided into two main ways, chesed and gvura, ava v'yira. Either complete love and complete, like we saw, complete pouring of the soul out to Hashem, or reflecting back into the self because of the tremendous bittul and the tremendous self-nullification that you feel Alagabi Hashem, and therefore you'll fear Him. Well, those are the two main basic movements of emotion in the divine soul, in the Nefesh Elokis, either Ava V'yira, and all the other midas develop one way or another from them. And so says the Alter Rebbe Noah. I want to finish the parak before. So he says, V'yitka makshafte b'choizek ubahasmoda. And if he doesn't do them, loi yikasher da'ata v'yitka makshafte b'choizek ubahasmoda, loi yoilid b'nafshe yira v'ava mitiyos. He won't give birth in his soul to genuine fear and genuine love of Hashem. Ki'im, what will he do then? Ki'im dimyoyin shov. He will only give birth to false images or false mirages. In other words, that a demoyan is a image. Now, an image is not the reality of a thing at all. An image is really an unreal thing. For example, when you look in a mirror, you're not really seeing anything. There's just a power on the part of the mercury at the back of the glass, which makes the glass work back the other way. It throws things back at you, literally. When you look in the mirror, you're really seeing a sort of reaction on the part of the mercury. You're not really seeing anything, because it's a dimion b'vad. And just like when you dream, sometimes you see things which don't make any sense, but they do make sense to you, because you're in an unreal world. You're in a world of demoyan. Therefore, things can happen which don't really make any sense in the concrete understanding world. They don't make any sense at all. That's a dimayon. A dimayon means something which can look a little bit like what we're after, but it's just a mirage. It's not really a genuine thing, and it could be that it's not even seichel. It could be it's just a form of foolishness or folly, yeah, and that's a dimayon. And he said, not only is it a dimyonis, not only is it mirages or images, but it's dimyonis shov, a meaningless dimyonis. Now the word shov, I think we mentioned the other day, the word shov is in the Seres HaDibros. It's written, you're not allowed to take Hashem's name, Eloisiso Hashem Elekecho La Shov, in the first Seres HaDibros. Yeah, La Shov. And the word shov over there, Rashi says that it just, you're not saying anything that really has any meaning. That once you've said something which is shov, you haven't added to anything to anybody's knowledge. And if you take an oath in Hashem's name for something which is like that, that's desecrating His holy name completely. And it's like as if you would swear that a marble column is made of marble. It doesn't add anything to it. Everybody knows it's marble. It's added nothing, brought no toelis or meaning or advance in human existence. That's called a shov. That's what the word shov means. These things are not only dimyonis, they don't bring anything. Sometimes a dimyon could maybe wake you up with, some idea that you might press ahead and try and make it real, or who knows what. But these are dimyonis shov. They have no meaning, and they don't lead anywhere. They're just mirages which have no implication of anything genuine, sensible, or real. So that's what he says. That's the type of av of a yira that you have if you don't use koach hadat. So, first of all, just between you, me, and the doorpost, there was some Chassidim who say nowadays, why we should have the altar of his dimyonis shov at least we should have the dimyonis shov. However, what it means is that it's bound up with what the Alter Rebbe says at the end of his first letter that he wrote to the Chassidim when he came from Petersburg. And the Friedrich Rebbe says in Ayom Yom, if he hadn't written that, he would have had maybe 50,000 more Chassidim, the Alter Rebbe. But he wrote, you have to have emes. He's demanding from people that they have to hold by the middle of emes. If you hold by this way of gaining your av of a yira, you're not holding in a genuine emes committed way to Chassidus. You're just happy to sort of play around, think a bit and say, oh, this is a great idea, this is a beautiful idea, and this is nice, and this is deep and wonderful, and then you put on your towels and tefillin, you daven, say Shalom Al Yisrael, shake hands with everybody, and go home. That's and so it might appear to the person that he had avira b'shas and davening, but the truth is that experience later will show that that's not the case. It'll all just blow away as if it weren't there, because it's a meaningless image. It's a meaningless mirage. Mirage show. But as I said, just some of the Chassidim say, halavai, we should have some of the Alter Rebbe's mirage show. At least we have that. Anyway, but you shouldn't talk that way, really, because the truth is that the Alter Rebbe meant something more meaningful and profound than that. Yira v'ava mitis ki'im dimyena shov v'alkein hadas, or this power and the moyach of commitment and of meaningfulness and bringing everything down into the emotion, joining up the two parts of the Adam, or that koyach hadas, hu kiyum hamidas, that is what causes your midas to be preserving, how do you call it? Constant. Kiyum. Kiyum means to keep something going time-wise. It doesn't just start today and go on tomorrow, but it's there and it continues to be there. Kiyum. So that's the power that even though it's still part of the moyach, as we said, that's what makes the midas real and lasting, or I might say permanent. He said, Vichiyusan, and it's their life. It's what makes your middah a levendige middah, a live middah. If you have Avos Hashem, then it's Ava with a chayas. It gets, every hour it keeps refreshing itself, and you have a chayas in Avos Hashem, or even in Yira, you have a chayas. Even though Yira is bittul, but you're not more scherdik. The deep understanding that you had lives in the middah and causes it that special life force that the moyach can give, and that makes the middas alive and I would say edel, but at the same time levendig. And that's the meaning of das. It is the kiyum hamidus v'chiyuson hu keilu chesed u'gvura. Oh, that's what we just said. That's what the Zohar called the Ben Bukhara, the Ben Abachor. Therefore, it's got two parts to it: Chesed and Gvura. They are Chesed and Gvura are emotions, but that's the Koyach Hadas, that it's got this powerful moyach and brain type emotion, which are a very, very interesting concept. Emotion in the brain, and he said, therefore, it's koilo. It has in itself both Chesed and Gvura. It is not Chesed and Gvura, but it's kolel. It keeps in itself Chesed and Gvura. Pirush avo v'anfeyo v'yira v'anfeyo. That means Chesed and Gvura b'poyo in midas are ahava and its branches, and yira and its branches. Like we pointed out the other day, for example, Netzach is a branch of ahava, and Hoid is a branch of yira, and so on. And so forth. There can be different branches of the line of Chesed and Ava, and different branches in emotions in the heart from Yira. However, they're all dependent, and the genuineness is all dependent in Koyach Hadas. Hashem should help us not to deceive ourselves, and to know that there's a lot of work ahead. Hashem should help us that, it's written that the Rav Rashab said that one of the reasons he founded the Tomchei Tmim was that the Bochim should learn Chassidus, and they should serve Hashem in Tefillah and they should come to Ava v'Yira. They should come to Ava Hashem and Yiras Hashem. So that's our goal, and that's our menu. That's what's called in modern Hebrew our tafrit, the thing which sets out the details which we're going to be presented with. So Hashem should all be with Tzlacha. You should have a good evening. Beis Hashem a good night.